Okay, welcome back for day 3 of our flipped classroom. Exciting news for today is that we have a new camera, so I can use both hands. Yay! I can even film going down or like this. So I'm very excited about that. So the first thing we're going to do is in our journals, we're going to add a new entry, and it's going to be over one-step equations. So on, you could put today's date, which is the 13th, and do one-step equations. Mine is on page 31. Yours could be on a different page. I do want you to have your notes that we've been taking the last 2 days. I want them folded and glued into your journal. Those are not reflected in the table of contents on mine, but you can add them on yours. And that's only because this is my journal I use for all my classes. So, my regular classes haven't been doing those notes that we've been doing. So that's another reason why. So I'm going to turn over to page 31. Which is going to be this page. Like I said, I use the same journal for my other classes, so kind of have to make sure it doesn't get too confusing for me. But we're going to just, on the top of this page, we're going to title this One Step Equations. So basically, before we get started with this, I want to give you kind of an award, pat on the back, because we learned in 3 days, or I guess if you take the last 10 days, 5 to 10 days, we learned what 8th grade math students typically learn in about 6 weeks. So thanks for hanging in with me. I just want you to see, this can be done as long as you can learn in an accelerated fashion, as long as you do what you're supposed to do. So kudos to those of you who have been watching the videos. I apologize to those of you who have had some errors in watching the videos and viewing the videos, but hopefully we're getting those fixed so that we won't have those problems anymore. What we're doing today is we're totally switching gears. We're getting off of y equals mx plus b and graphing slopes and y-intercepts, and we're going to equations. We're going to be reviewing one-step equations, which is what you learned last year in 6th grade, in order to go fast forward into 2 and, for y'all, 3-step equations, or multi-step equations, because we need to get caught back up with our regular math classes, so that y'all are kind of on pace to finish what you need to do in 7th grade. So we've been doing the past few days 8th grade math, because that's what y'all are, advanced math. So since you don't get 8th grade math, we have to learn that in 7th grade as well. So yeah. So today we're going to be doing one-step equations, and I'm going to write down an example. So you may have seen in the past an equation that looks like this: 40s equals 10. And in the past, in 6th grade, you were taught how to solve that. That is just a one-step equation. And it might say something like solve for s. And if you remember, the key is to get the s and the, which is called the variable, which we're going to label that right now. In math, the letters are called variables. Our goal is to get the letters by themselves on one side of the equal sign and the numbers on the other side. They are like siblings, okay? If you and your siblings are ever together for a long period of time, you start fighting. Well, that's what I want you to think of when you think of numbers and letters, okay? So with these equations, you got to separate them, like your parents do when you and your siblings fight. They separate you. So we are going to separate the letters, the variables, from the numbers. And to do that, we have to do what's called the inverse in math. And that just means the opposite. Okay? So here are the steps for solving one-step equations. The first step is to isolate the variable. Again, the variable is a letter. A lot of times we see it as an X, but it can be any letter. It could be Y, C, Z, W, etc. Okay, any letter is a variable. Okay, isolate the variable. That means get it by itself, and then the second step is to perform the inverse operation. Okay? So when you're performing the inverse operation, that is the same thing as opposite operation. So remember, these are your pairs. Addition is paired with subtraction. Okay, so they're opposites of one another. And multiplication is paired with division. You don't ever mix these up, okay? So let me explain what this means, okay? Just to refresh your memory. In our example over here of 40s equals 10, example, 40s equals 10, we want to isolate the variable. We got to get that letter, the S, by itself. So in our heads we have to think, what is attaching the S to the 40 right now? Well, it is multiplication, because that's what's happening here to stick the 40 to the S. Okay? And so we have to do what's called the inverse or opposite operation. And multiplication's opposite is division. So we are going to divide by 40 to get that off. Well, the third rule for equations is perform operation to both sides. And I'm going to put up here the same operation to both sides. Okay, just like you and your siblings, if you and your sister or you and your brother are fighting, your mom and dad want to separate you, and then they give you a prize later on. We all know, as a parent, if you give one kid one thing, what happens? The other kid wants the same thing. You have to keep it fair. Well, that's the same thing with these equations. If you're going to divide by 40 on one side to get that 40 off, to get it by itself, you have to do it on the other side as well. You can't just do one thing to one side. It has to be done on the other side as well. Okay? So now, 40s divided by 40 equals 10 divided by 40. So we divided by 40 on both sides. Well, 40 divided by 40 cancels out because it just becomes 1. 40 over 40 is 1. So now we have S by itself, which is what we wanted, and we have 10 divided by 40 on this side. Well, we're going to simplify that down to 1 over 4 because 10 will go into itself one time and 40 4 times. So now our answer is 1/4. S equals 1/4. Really easy. Okay? So let's do some examples here. All right? Let's do an addition example. W plus 14 equals 30. Okay? W plus 14 equals 30. Write that down. So we have to think to ourselves, number one is isolate the variable. Well, how are we going to get that by itself? We have to think, what's attaching the number to the variable right now? And right now, it's addition. So we're going to have to subtract. So we're going to subtract 14. We subtract that same number to get it off from both sides. 14. Minus 14 over here, minus 14 over here. So over here, a positive 14 minus 14 equals 0. Okay. So now you have w plus 0, which is just w, equals 30 minus 14. So 30 minus 14, that is 16. So your answer is w equals 16. Okay, let's do another example. So that was addition. Let's do a subtraction example. Let's say d minus 5 equals 2. D minus 5 equals 2. Well, to get, we have to get the letter by itself, the variable by itself, we have to see what's going on to attach the number to the variable, and here it's subtraction. And our inverse operation for subtraction is addition. So we're just going to simply add 5 to both sides. That gets this by itself because that cancels out. And then you have d equals 7. That's your answer. Okay, we're going to do a multiplication. 25 equals 5e. Now notice on this one I put the variable on the opposite side of the equal sign. It doesn't matter which side it's on. You do the same things. You ask yourself, what's attaching the 5 to the variable, to the letter? Well, right now it's multiplication, so we're going to go up here and look at the opposite is division. We're going to divide to get that 5 off. Divide by 5 on both sides. Well, this cancels out, so you're left with e by itself over here, and over here you have 25 divided by 5, which equals 5. So now your answer is 5 equals e, or you can write it just like, if it makes you feel better, e equals 5. It's the same thing. Either of those will work. Finally, let's do a division. So we have c divided by 11 equals 17. We want to get c by itself, and right here we're dividing to attach that number to the c. So we have to multiply to get it off. We have to do the inverse operation. So we're going to multiply by 11 on both sides. Well, if you kind of want to picture it this way, this is kind of like 11 over 1 times c over 11. When you do this, these cancel out, and you just get stuck with c over 1, which is just c. So that's what we wanted. Okay? So now you just have c, and over here you have 17 times 11. Well, if you do 17 times 11, you get 187. If you were to work that out. So your answer is c equals 187. And that's it. Tomorrow in class we're going to be going into, we're going to be practicing this, and then we're going to, the next day we're going to do multi-step equations. So have a good night. Thanks.